They had lived in the same small house for more than 40 years. The paint on the walls had faded, and the wooden door made a soft sound every time it opened. But the home was clean, warm, and full of quiet care. The elderly couple woke up early every morning just as they had done their whole lives. There was no alarm clock. Their bodies knew the time. The day always began with simple routines, slow movements, gentle words spoken over a cup of tea. The man moved carefully now. His steps were shorter than they used to be, and his hands sometimes shook, but he still tried to do things on his own. The woman watched him closely, ready to help without making him feel weak. She had her own pain too, mostly in her knees and back, yet she never complained. They had learned long ago that life did not become easier by talking about pain all the time. Their home was not large, but it was open to others. For many years, people from the neighborhood came and went freely. Some came for advice, some for food, and some just to sit and rest. When someone was sick, the couple would cook soup and send it over. When a young family had no money at the end of the month, they would quietly place a bag of groceries near their door. No one was ever asked to pay anything back. They believed kindness should be silent. If you spoke too much about helping others, it lost its meaning. That belief guided them through most of their lives. They never wrote about their good deeds, never shared stories to gain praise. To them, helping was as normal as breathing years ago. The man had worked long hours at a job that never made him rich but always kept food on the table. The woman stayed home, raising children, caring for elders, and later helping neighbors. When their own children grew up and moved away, the house became quieter, but the couple did not feel empty. They found purpose in being useful to others. At one time, their home felt like a resting place for the whole street. People would stop by without calling first. Laughter filled the small rooms. Children ran in and out, sometimes staying for hours. The woman would smile as she served tea, even if she was tired. The man enjoyed listening more than talking. He remembered details about people's lives that even close relatives forgot. But time changes things slowly, almost without warning. One by one, the visits became less frequent. People became busy. Some moved away. Others found new places to go, new people to rely on. The elderly couple did not notice at first. They were used to giving, not counting. One winter evening, the woman realized that no one had visited in several days. She mentioned it softly, not as a complaint, just an observation. The man nodded but said nothing. He knew this day would come eventually. People grow older, but the world keeps moving fast. Still, when someone knocked on the door asking for help, the couple never turned them away. Even when their savings grew smaller, they shared what they had. The woman often said that money was only useful if it made life easier for someone else. The man agreed. They trusted that life had a way of balancing things. There was a young man who once stayed in their spare room for weeks when he had nowhere else to go. They fed him, listened to his worries, and encouraged him to keep trying. When he finally left, he promised to visit. At first, he did. Then months passed and eventually years. The couple never spoke badly of him. They hoped he was doing well. There was also a woman from down the street who often borrowed small amounts of money. The elderly couple never wrote anything down. They knew repayment was not guaranteed. Sometimes the money came back, sometimes it did not. What mattered more was that someone felt supported when they needed it. As the couple aged, their strength faded, but their habits stayed the same. The woman still woke early to prepare simple meals. The man still swept the small yard, even if it took him much longer than before. They never asked neighbors for help unless it was absolutely necessary. Pride was not the reason. They simply did not want to be a burden. There were days when the house felt very quiet. The sound of the clock seemed louder than it should have been. On those days, the woman would sit near the window and watch people walk by. Some of those faces were familiar. Some had once been regular visitors. Most passed without looking toward the house. The man noticed this too. Once, he gently asked, not with anger, but with curiosity, why people seemed distant now. The woman thought for a moment and said maybe everyone was just tired. Life had become heavier for many. They both agreed not to judge. Judgment only made the heart bitter. Their children called from time to time, but calls were short. Life was busy, jobs were demanding, and families had grown. The elderly couple understood. They never asked for visits, never reminded anyone of missed birthdays or holidays. They believed love should not be forced. Even so, there were moments when the woman felt a deep ache that had nothing to do with her knees or back. It was the feeling of being slowly forgotten. She never said it out loud. She feared that speaking it might make it real. One afternoon, the man returned from a short walk looking more tired than usual. He sat down heavily and closed his eyes. The woman brought him water and sat beside him. Neither spoke. They shared a silence built over decades of understanding. In that silence, both knew that time was no longer something they could ignore. That evening, as they ate a simple meal, the man said something unexpected. He suggested they begin organizing their papers. The woman looked surprised but did not argue. She knew what he meant. It was not about fear of death. It was about responsibility. They spent the next few days going through old documents, letters, and small records of their life. There were photographs of people who were no longer around. There were thank you notes from years ago, written in shaky handwriting by people they had helped. The woman held those notes carefully as if they were fragile. As they worked, memories came back. Some were happy, some painful. They remembered nights spent comforting others, days when they had given away money meant for themselves, and moments when they felt useful and needed. They also remembered times when promises were made and quietly forgotten. The man suggested they write down a few thoughts, not for anyone specific, just as a way to leave something behind. The woman agreed but said they should take their time. Whatever they left should come from honesty, not sadness. Outside, life continued as usual. Cars passed. People laughed and argued. No one noticed the quiet work happening inside the small house. No one knew that important decisions were slowly forming in the minds of two people who had spent a lifetime giving. That night, before going to sleep, the woman stood in the doorway and looked around the house. It was not perfect, but it held their entire life. She whispered a quiet hope that kindness would not disappear from the world. Even if their own presence became smaller, the man lay awake for a while longer. He thought about all the faces he had known, all the hands he had held during difficult times. He felt no anger, only a calm understanding that truth often reveals itself too late. By morning, the house was quiet again, but something had changed. A path had been chosen, even if no one else could see it yet. The first step toward that unseen truth had already been taken. After they finished sorting the papers, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but the silence felt heavier than before. The days passed slowly. Morning light came through the same window, the clock ticked the same way, yet something inside the house felt different. It was as if the walls themselves were aware that time was running shorter now. The man began forgetting small things. Sometimes he would misplace his glasses and search for them with growing frustration, only to find them resting on the table beside him. The woman noticed these changes and tried to help gently, never pointing them out directly. She believed dignity was more important than accuracy. If he felt capable, that mattered more than being right. The woman also had her struggles. Some mornings standing up from bed felt like lifting a heavy weight. She took breaks while cooking, sitting down for a moment before continuing. Still, she prepared meals the same way she always had. Simple food, cooked with care, eaten slowly together at the small table. They talked more now. Not about big dreams, but about ordinary memories. They spoke about the early years of their marriage, the small rented room where they first lived, the time when even buying bread felt like a challenge. They laughed softly at how young and impatient they once were. Sometimes the conversation turned to people they had helped. The man remembered faces clearly. He remembered the fear in people's eyes when they came asking for help, and the relief when they realized they would not be judged. He wondered quietly where those people were now. He hoped life had treated them better. Days went by without visitors. The woman no longer expected the sound of knocking at the door. Still, she kept the house ready, as if someone might arrive at any moment. Old habits are hard to let go of. One afternoon, a neighbor passed by and waved briefly without stopping. The woman waved back, smiling, but her smile faded as the neighbor walked on. She sat down slowly and looked at her hands. They were thin now, marked with age and work. Those hands had held crying children, carried heavy bags, and offered comfort more times than she could count. The man noticed her sadness and reached for her hand. He said nothing. He did not need to. They both understood that being forgotten hurt more than physical pain. Later that week, a distant relative called. The conversation was polite but rushed. There were questions about documents, about property, about things that could be measured. There were no questions about health, about loneliness, or about how the days were being spent. After the call ended, the woman placed the phone down carefully and took a deep breath. She did not express anger. Instead, she felt a quiet clarity. She realized that people often remember others only when they expect something in return. This thought did not make her bitter, but it did make her thoughtful. That evening, the couple spoke again about their earlier decision. The man said that whatever they left behind should reflect truth, not obligation. The woman agreed. She said kindness should never be rewarded by blood alone. It should be recognized by action. They began paying closer attention to small details. Who checked on them without being asked? Who spoke with sincerity? Who remembered them as people, not as possibilities? These observations were not made with pride or revenge. They were simply honest. One morning, the man slipped while stepping outside. He did not fall completely, but the fear stayed with him. The woman helped him back inside, her heart racing. For the first time, they both admitted out loud that they could not rely only on themselves anymore. Still, they did not ask for help right away. They adjusted their routine instead. The man stopped going outside alone. The woman moved things closer so she would not have to bend as much. They adapted quietly the way they always had. As weeks passed, the man's energy faded further. He slept more during the day. The woman sat nearby, sometimes reading, sometimes simply watching him breathe. She thought about how many years they had shared. So many struggles had come and gone, but this felt different. This was not something effort alone could fix. There were moments when memories returned sharply. The woman remembered nights when the house was full, when voices overlapped, when laughter echoed from room to room. She wondered how such fullness could fade into such quiet without anyone noticing. The man, too, felt the weight of memory. One afternoon, he asked the woman if she ever regretted giving so much. She looked at him with surprise and answered honestly. She said she did not regret helping anyone, but she did regret that kindness was often forgotten so icily. He nodded slowly. That answer stayed with him. A letter arrived one day, not handwritten, but official. It reminded them of things they already knew about age, responsibility, and preparation. The woman placed the letter in the pile of documents they had started organizing earlier. It felt like confirmation that their instincts had been right. They spent more evenings sitting together in silence. The silence was not empty. It was filled with shared understanding. Sometimes the man would speak suddenly, remembering a small detail from the past. The woman listened carefully, knowing that one day these moments would be all she had. Outside, seasons shifted. Leaves fell and new ones began to grow. Life moved forward without pausing for anyone. The couple watched these changes from their window, feeling both part of the world and separate from it. Another phone call came, this time from someone they had once helped greatly. The voice was friendly but distant. The conversation stayed shallow. When it ended, the man said softly that people rarely call just to listen. That night, he struggled to sleep. The woman stayed awake beside him, holding his hand. She felt fear, but she also felt strength. Love, she realized, was the only thing that truly remained when everything else faded. In the following days, the man's health worsened. He moved more slowly, spoke less, and often stared into space. The woman cared for him patiently, the same way she had cared for everyone else throughout her life. But this time, the responsibility felt heavier. She reached out once, just once, asking for a little help. The response was delayed, uncertain, and incomplete. That response told her everything she needed to know. Instead of feeling broken, she felt resolved. She knew now that the decisions they were making were necessary, not as punishment but as truth. One quiet evening, as the sun set, the man squeezed her hand weakly and said that he trusted her completely. Whatever happened next, he wanted her to remember that they had lived honestly. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. She promised him that their story would not end in silence, even if others chose not to listen. And as night settled over the small house, the second step toward a hidden truth was firmly taken. Though the world outside remained unaware, the days after that quiet promise moved slowly, as if time itself had decided to be gentle. The man's strength continued to fade, not suddenly, but in small ways that were easy to miss if you were not watching closely. He took longer to finish sentences. His eyes stayed closed more often. Yet when he looked at the woman, there was still warmth, trust, and a lifetime of shared understanding. The woman adjusted her entire world around him. She planned her day by his breathing, his comfort, and his needs. Sleep became lighter for her. Every small sound woke her, and she listened carefully to be sure he was still resting peacefully. Love, she realized, was not loud. It was quiet attention. Sometimes he spoke about the past in fragments. He remembered the first winter they spent together, when money was tight and the house was barely warm. He remembered how she had wrapped old cloth around the windows to keep the cold out. He smiled at that memory. He said she had always found a way. She listened, holding his hand, guiding him gently back to the present when his thoughts wandered too far. She did not correct him if details were wrong. What mattered was how the memory made him feel. The house felt smaller now, not because its walls had changed, but because their world had narrowed. Still, there was peace in that small space. They had shared bigger storms before. One morning, the man could not stand without help. The woman supported him with all the strength she had left. Fear passed through her, sharp and sudden, but she pushed it aside. Fear would not help him. Calm would. She helped him sit near the window, where sunlight touched his face softly. He seemed comforted by that light. He said it reminded him of mornings when the house was full and busy. She nodded, even though her chest felt tight. That afternoon, a stranger came to the door, delivering papers that required signatures. The woman invited him in briefly. The man watched quietly as she handled the conversation. The stranger was polite but distant, doing his job without curiosity. When he left, the house returned to silence. The woman sat beside the man again. She realized how invisible they had become, not just to people they once knew, but to the world itself. This thought did not make her angry. It made her determined. Over the next few days, she began writing more. Not letters to specific people, but reflections. Simple words about life, kindness, and truth. She wrote slowly, carefully, as if each sentence mattered deeply. These were not complaints. They were observations shaped by decades of living. She wrote about giving without keeping score, about how easy it was for people to take kindness and assume it would always be there, about how gratitude faded faster than need. She wrote honestly, without blaming anyone by name. The man noticed the papers and asked what she was writing. She told him the truth. She said she wanted their story to be understood someday, even if it was too late for it to change anything. He smiled faintly and said that understanding was enough. As his condition worsened, decisions had to be made. The woman contacted professionals she had once avoided. The conversations were difficult and tiring, filled with words that felt heavy and final. Still, she listened carefully and asked questions. She wanted to be prepared. Through all of this, there were few calls from others. Some people checked in briefly. Most did not. The woman stopped expecting more. Expectation only led to disappointment. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the window, the man became restless. He spoke about unfinished things, about hopes he once had for the people they helped. He wondered if they had made any difference at all. The woman leaned close and told him the truth as she saw it. She said they may never know the full impact of their kindness, but that did not mean it was wasted. Even small moments of care mattered. He closed his eyes, comforted by her words. That night, he slept deeply. The woman stayed awake, watching him, remembering everything. She remembered their wedding day, simple and quiet. She remembered the first time they helped someone who was not family. She remembered the way kindness became a habit, then a way of life. When morning came, the man did not wake easily. The woman felt fear again, heavier this time. She spoke his name softly, touched his face, and waited. His eyes opened slowly and he smiled faintly. Relief washed over her. But she knew now that time was fragile. In the days that followed, the man spoke less. His strength came and went. Sometimes he was clear and present. Other times he seemed far away. The woman stayed patient through it all. Patience, she knew, was love expressed over time. During one quiet afternoon, he asked her if she believed people were good by nature. She thought carefully before answering. She said she believed people were capable of good, but fear and comfort often got in the way. He nodded, satisfied with that answer. Later, she added a few more pages to her writing. She included moments when kindness was returned unexpectedly. She wanted balance. She did not want their story to sound bitter or one-sided. As weeks passed, the man's body grew weaker, but his presence remained strong in small ways. A squeeze of the hand, soft look, a slight smile when she spoke. One afternoon, he asked her to read to him. She chose simple passages, words that were easy to follow. Her voice filled the room gently. For a moment, the house felt less empty. Outside, neighbors continued their lives. Some noticed the curtains rarely moved now. Few stopped to ask why. One evening, the man suddenly became very still. The woman sensed the change immediately. She held him, spoke to him, told him she was there. He listened, even if he could not respond fully. His breathing slowed. The room felt heavy, sacred, and quiet. When it was over, the woman remained seated, holding his hand long after it grew still. There was no dramatic moment, just a deep, aching silence. She cried quietly, not loudly. Grief, she learned, did not always scream. Sometimes it sat beside you and refused to leave. After some time, she stood slowly and did what needed to be done. Her movements felt distant, as if she were watching herself from far away. Still, she stayed calm. He would have wanted that. In the days that followed, people reached out briefly. Messages were sent. Words of sympathy were offered. Some came from expected places. Others did not come at all. The woman received these moments with grace. She did not measure them. She simply noted them. Alone in the house now, she felt the weight of everything they had built together. The silence was different. It was no longer shared. Yet even in her grief, clarity remained. The decisions they had begun were more important now than ever. They were not about loss. They were about truth. She returned to her writing with renewed focus. She reviewed documents again, adjusting details with care. Every choice was made thoughtfully, without anger. She thought about the people who would be surprised one day. She did not feel satisfaction in that thought. She felt responsibility. Kindness, she believed, should teach something, even if the lesson came late. As she closed the folder one evening, she felt tired, but steady. The third step toward revealing a hidden truth had been completed. Outside, the world continued on, unaware that a quiet life had ended, and that a powerful message was slowly taking shape. After the days of formalities passed, the house grew even quieter. The woman now lived alone in the space that had once held two lives, moving together in gentle rhythm. Every room carried his presence. The chair by the window was the cup he always used. The faint marks on the wall from years of living. Nothing felt empty, yet everything felt heavier. She moved through the days slowly, giving herself time. Grief did not follow a straight path. Some mornings she felt calm and steady. Other days, a single sound or memory could bring tears without warning. She allowed it all. She had spent her life caring for others. Now she allowed herself to feel. People came briefly after the loss. Some neighbors stopped by with food. Few relatives visited out of duty. Words were spoken, hands were shaken, and then life moved on for them. The woman noticed how quickly routines returned for everyone else. Once the visits ended, she was alone again. She was not lost. There was still work to do. She returned to the papers she and her husband had organized together. Sitting at the same table, she opened folders slowly, reading each page with care. These were not just documents. They were decisions made with intention. Every choice reflected years of observation, patience, and truth. She contacted the people who needed to be informed, following the correct steps, asking questions, and listening carefully. Her voice remained calm, even when the conversations felt cold. She was not doing this for attention or reaction. She was doing it because it was right. As news began to quietly spread, subtle changes appeared. Phone calls came more often now. Some voices sounded suddenly warmer, more interested. Questions were asked that had never been asked before. How was she feeling? Did she need anything? Was she managing alone? She listened politely. She answered honestly, but briefly. She did not accuse anyone. She simply observed. The timing of concern was not lost on her. One afternoon, a distant family member visited unexpectedly. The visit felt awkward. Conversation stayed light, circling around memories and vague offers of help. Eventually, the subject of the house and belongings came up, gently at first, then more directly. The woman responded calmly. She said everything was already taken care of. There was nothing to worry about. That. Her tone ended the conversation. After the visit, she sat quietly for a long time. She felt sadness, not anger. She realized how deeply people connected love with possession. That understanding strengthened her resolve. In the weeks that followed, official notices were prepared. Dates were set. Letters were written and sent. The woman did not rush. She wanted everything done clearly and fairly. She spent her evenings reflecting on the past. She remembered specific faces, people who had shown genuine care, people who had disappeared once their problems were solved. She did not judge them harshly. She understood human weakness. But she also believed truth should be seen. She added final notes to the documents. Not explanations, not apologies. Just quiet clarity. As the day approached when everything would be revealed, her health began to weaken. The long emotional strain had taken its toll. She moved more slowly, rested more often, but her mind remained clear. She knew she had limited time as well. One evening, she sat by the window and watched the sky change colors. She thought about her husband and felt a deep sense of peace. They had done what they believed was right. That was enough. The day finally arrived. In a small, formal room, people gathered. Some came with curiosity. Others came with expectation. Few came with true reflection. The woman was present, calm and composed, supported by quiet professionals who respected her wishes. As documents were read aloud, the atmosphere shifted. Assets were listed. Instructions were explained. Names were spoken. With each detail, surprise grew. Some people received more than they expected. Others received nothing at all. Few received letters instead of property or money. The woman watched faces carefully. She saw shock, confusion, relief, and regret. She felt no pleasure in these reactions, only understanding. When her turn came to speak, she said very little. She did not defend her choices. She did not explain her reasoning in detail. She simply said that kindness had shaped their lives and truth had shaped their decisions. Silence followed. After the gathering ended, conversations broke out in quiet corners. Questions were whispered. Some people felt hurt. Others felt exposed. A few felt grateful. The woman left without lingering. Her part was done. In the days that followed, the town buzzed with talk. Stories were shared, retold, and reshaped. Some defended the elderly couple, others criticized them. Everyone had an opinion, but among the noise, a few people took time to reflect honestly. They remembered moments they had ignored, calls they had not returned, visits they had postponed until it was too late. Letters left behind were opened slowly. They were simple. They spoke of moments remembered clearly. Acts of kindness acknowledged. Absences noted without accusation. The words were gentle but truthful. For some, reading those letters was harder than losing money. It forced them to face themselves. The woman returned home, tired but peaceful. She slept deeply that night. In the following weeks, her health declined further. She accepted help when it was offered sincerely. She no longer felt the need to prove strength. She spent her final days quietly, surrounded by familiar walls and memories. She reread old notes and smiled softly. She felt no regret. When the time came, she passed as gently as she had lived. The house stood still after that. But its story did not end. The truth had been revealed. Not loudly, not cruelly, and long after the doors closed and the lights went out, the lesson remained, waiting to be understood by those willing to listen. After the woman was gone, the house stood quietly, holding the weight of 2 full lives. Dust settled slowly. Sunlight moved across the same floors it had crossed for decades. Nothing dramatic happened, yet everything felt finished. The story of the elderly couple had reached its end, but its meaning was only beginning to spread. People reacted in different ways once the final truth became clear. Some were deeply shaken. Others tried to hide their discomfort behind excuses and explanations. A few felt relieved that no one was pointing fingers directly at them. But almost everyone felt something they could not easily name. Those who had expected rewards felt the sharpest pain, spoke among themselves, trying to understand how things had gone so differently from what they imagined. Some said the couple had been unfair, some said they should have been more forgiving. But deep inside, many knew the truth was not about fairness. It was about honesty. There were also people who received something small but meaningful. A letter, a note, a remembered moment written in careful words. These people read slowly, sometimes more than once. For them, the inheritance was not shocking. It felt natural, felt earned through simple presence and care. One woman sat alone after reading her letter. She remembered how she used to stop by just to talk, without asking for anything. Remembered listening more than speaking. The letter thanked her for that. It reminded her that being there mattered. She cried softly, not from sadness, but from understanding. In the town, conversations changed over time. At first, the story was told with excitement. Later, it was told with reflection. People began to look at their own choices differently. Some reached out to elders they had not spoken to in years. Others apologized for silence they had once justified. Not everyone changed. Some remained defensive. Some chose to forget. The couple's story did not magically fix human nature, but it planted a quiet seed. The house was eventually cleared, as planned. Items were distributed carefully. Nothing was rushed. The process was respectful, calm, and final. Each object carried memory, but also closure. There were no grand speeches, no public signs. The couple did not need monuments. Their legacy was never meant to be seen. It was meant to be felt. Months passed. Seasons changed. The town slowly moved on. Yet sometimes, during quiet evenings, people still spoke about the elderly couple. Not about money, but about the feeling their home once had. A place where no one felt judged. Where kindness felt normal, some younger people who had only heard stories began asking questions. They wanted to know why the couple made those choices. Why they lived the way they did. Older residents answered carefully. They said the couple believed love showed itself in actions, not words. In one small corner of the town, a simple act happened. A neighbor helped another without expecting thanks. No one noticed. That was how it always began. The truth revealed by the inheritance did not shout. It whispered. It reminded people that kindness remembered nothing. But truth remembered everything. Even those who felt wronged eventually quieted. Time softened anger. What remained was reflection. The elderly couple never returned to see what they had started. They did not need to. Their lives had already spoken clearly, and so the story ended where it began, with simple people, quiet choices, and a lesson that waited patiently for those ready to learn, because in the end, what we give when no one is watching is what speaks the loudest when we are gone. After everything had settled, town slowly returned to its routine. Shops opened and closed as usual. Children played in the streets. Life moved forward, just as it always did. But something under the surface had changed. Even if many people did not speak about it openly, the elderly couple's story did not disappear. It stayed in quiet conversations, in thoughtful pauses. In moments when people hesitated before turning away from someone who needed help, the inheritance had revealed truth, but the real impact came afterward. When no one was watching, some people tried to pretend it never mattered. They returned to their old habits, convincing themselves that the couple's choices were unusual, even unfair. They said life was complicated, that everyone was busy, that no one owed anyone anything. Saying these things helped them sleep at night. Others were not so comfortable. One man found himself standing outside an older neighbor's house one evening, unsure why he had stopped there. He had not spoken to that neighbor in years. He told himself he was just passing by, but deep down, he knew that was not true. He knocked, waited, and for the first time in a long while, asked how someone else was doing without expecting anything in return. The conversation was short and awkward, but it mattered. A woman who had received only a letter from the inheritance kept it in her drawer. She read it often. The words were simple, but they reminded her of who she used to be before life became rushed and self-focused. Slowly, she began visiting an elderly aunt she had ignored for years. At first, guilt pushed her. Later, genuine care took its place. Not everyone learned the lesson at the same pace. Some people needed more time. Some needed loss. Some never learned at all. The elderly couple never expected perfection from anyone. They only believed truth deserved to be seen. The house they once lived in remained empty for a while. People walked past it daily. Some slowed down without realizing why. The place felt different now, as if it carried a quiet presence. Eventually, the house was sold, just as planned. New people moved in, unaware of the history held by those walls. Still, stories have a way of surviving without buildings. In one small gathering, someone mentioned the couple while talking about kindness. The room grew quiet. Everyone remembered something. A missed visit. An ignored call. A moment when help was offered too late or not at all. No one said anything harsh. They did not need to. Silence did the work. The truth the couple left behind was not meant to punish. It was meant to reflect. And reflections can be uncomfortable. Months later, a community project began quietly. It was not announced loudly. A few people started it, inspired by guilt, memory, and a desire to do better. They helped elders with small tasks, groceries, repairs, simple conversations. No cameras. No praise. It was imperfect. Sometimes people forgot. Sometimes help came late. But it existed, and that mattered. The elderly couple's story continued changing shape. Some people told it as a warning. Others told it as inspiration. Each version said more about the teller than the couple themselves. What remained consistent was the lesson that kindness without attention fades. But kindness with truth leaves a mark. One evening, someone placed flowers near the old house, before remembering no one lived there anymore. The flowers were left anyway. No name was spoken. No reason was given. Years passed, new generations grew up hearing pieces of the story. They did not know all the details. They did not need to. What stayed with them was the idea that how you treat people when they have nothing left to offer says everything about who you are. And somewhere in the quiet flow of time, the elderly couple's lives continued doing what they had always done. They helped. Even after they were gone. Time passed. But the quiet impact of the elderly couple's life did not fade. It settled into people slowly, the way truth often does. Not all at once, not loudly, but deep enough to stay. Some people began to notice small changes in themselves. A pause before ignoring a message. A second thought before saying, "I'm too busy." These moments felt uncomfortable at first, like standing in front of a mirror you had avoided for years. One woman remembered how the elderly couple used to listen without interrupting. She tried doing the same with her own family. At first, it felt strange. She was used to rushing, to thinking ahead while others spoke. Slowly, she learned to stay present. Conversations felt warmer, less rushed, more real. A man who had once believed kindness was weakness began to question that belief. He remembered how the couple never raised their voices, yet somehow always felt strong. He realized strength was not about control. It was about patience. Not everyone connected these changes directly to the inheritance or the letters. Some did not even remember the details anymore. But the feeling remained, shaping choices in quiet ways. In another part of town, an older woman sat alone most evenings. She had watched the elderly couple from a distance for years, but never truly known them. After hearing their story, she felt a sudden fear. Not of death, but of being forgotten while still alive. She began reaching out, starting small. A greeting. A short visit. It made a difference. The story also stirred uncomfortable conversations within families. Some adult children reflected on how rarely they visited their aging parents. Excuses that once felt reasonable now felt thin. A few made changes. Others felt defensive. Growth, after all, is never easy. There were moments of regret too. People wishing they could go back and do one thing differently. Visit once more. Say thank you. Sit longer. Those moments hurt the most because they had no solution. Yet the elderly couple's story never asked for regret. It asked for awareness. One evening, during a small gathering, someone asked a simple question. Do you think they knew what would happen after? The room went quiet. Someone answered softly that the couple probably did not care about reactions. They cared about honesty. That answer stayed with many people. The truth was, the couple never wanted to shock anyone. They wanted to show something gently, the way they had lived their whole lives. Through example, not force, as years passed, the inheritance became less of a topic, but the idea behind it stayed alive. People remembered how kindness had been given freely, without promises, without conditions, and how forgetting that kindness had consequences, even if they came late in schools. Teachers told simplified versions of the story, focusing on respect for elders and the importance of presence. Children listened with curiosity, asking innocent questions. Some went home and hugged their grandparents without knowing why. Life continued to prove the couple's belief. People who gave only to receive often felt disappointed. People who gave without expectation felt lighter, even when life was hard. Some individuals tried to copy the couple's actions exactly, thinking that was the lesson. But they soon learned the lesson was deeper. It was not about money or inheritance. It was about attention. Attention was the real gift the couple had given. Attention to pain that others ignored. Attention to silence. Attention to small truths. One quiet afternoon, a man cleaning out his old belongings found a note written years ago. It was from the elderly couple, thanking him for checking on them during a difficult time. He had forgotten that moment completely. The note made him sit down and cry. Not from sadness, but from the realization that small actions mattered more than he ever knew. In the end, the elderly couple did not change the world. They never tried to. They changed moments. And moments, when added together, change people. Their story did not end with closure. It ended with continuation. Because every day, someone somewhere faced a choice. To notice or to ignore. To show up or to stay away. To remember or to forget. And in those choices, the couple's quiet presence still lived. The story did not end when the house was sold and the papers were closed. In many ways, that was when it truly began. The elderly couple had lived quietly, but their absence created a space that people could not ignore. Silence has a way of making truth louder. Some people carried the story with them without realizing it. It showed up in small moments. A phone call made after months of delay. A visit that lasted longer than planned. A question asked with real interest instead of habit. Others resisted the feeling. They told themselves they had done nothing wrong. Life was busy. Everyone struggled. No one could help everyone. These thoughts felt safe, but they did not fully settle the discomfort inside. A man who had once borrowed money from the couple stood one evening in his kitchen, remembering how icily they had trusted him. He had promised to return, and never did. The money itself no longer mattered. What stayed with him was the ease with which he had walked away. He realized that forgetting someone who helped you is easier than facing your own gratitude. He could not change the past, but he could change himself. The next day, he helped someone else quietly, without telling anyone. It did not erase guilt, but it softened it. Across town, an older woman sat alone, watching the same street she had watched for years. She had known the couple only by sight. After hearing their story, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope mixed with fear. Hope that kindness still mattered. Fear that time was shorter than she wanted to admit. She began writing letters to people she had lost touch with. Not long ones. Just simple notes. Thinking of you. Hope you are well. No expectations. Some replies came. Some did not. Still, she felt lighter. Families also changed in quiet ways. Some dinners lasted longer. Some arguments softened. Some apologies were finally spoken. Not because people became perfect, but because they became more aware. The elderly couple had always believed that people were not bad, just distracted. Their story proved that again and again. There were also moments of resistance. A few people felt angry. They believed the couple should have explained themselves more, that they should have warned people, that kindness deserved loyalty. These people missed the point. Kindness was never a contract. Time moved on, as it always does. New stories filled the town. New struggles replaced old ones. But the couple's story stayed underneath everything. It's like a quiet reminder waiting to be felt. One day, a small gathering took place in a community space. No one called it a memorial. It was simply people coming together to talk about caring for elders. The elderly couple's story came up naturally, not as a lesson, but as an example. Someone said that the couple never asked for attention, yet somehow earned it in the end. Another person said the couple showed that love remembered everything, even silence. There were tears, but also smiles. Because the story was not only sad, it was meaningful. Children listened from the side, not fully understanding, but sensing that something important was being shared. These children would grow up carrying pieces of the story without knowing where it came from. The truth was simple. People wanted to be seen. The elderly couple had seen others clearly. Even when others stopped seeing them, that truth stayed. Years later, someone cleaning an old drawer found a small object the couple had once given them. It was nothing valuable, but holding it brought back a memory of warmth and safety. That moment mattered more than anything written in a will. The elderly couple had lived without asking what they would get back. That was their greatest strength. In the end, their story was not about inheritance. It was about presence, about what remains when noise fades, about how love is measured not by words spoken, but by time given. Time had passed quietly, but the meaning of everything that happened had only grown deeper. The elderly couple were no longer spoken of every day, yet their presence still lived in the choices people made when no one was watching. Some lessons take time to settle. At first, people remembered the shock. Later, they remembered the feeling. Finally, they remembered the truth behind it all. One truth stood out clearly now. Being kind once is easy. Being kind consistently, especially when there is nothing to gain, is much harder. A man who once avoided visiting older relatives began going regularly. Not because he felt guilty anymore, but because he realized how short conversations could still carry meaning. He learned that sometimes all an older person wanted was to feel noticed. A woman who had spent years chasing success found herself slowing down. She remembered how the elderly couple never rushed kindness. They listened patiently, even when they were tired. She tried doing the same with people around her. Life felt less heavy when she stopped measuring everything. The story continued changing. People in quiet ways. There were also those who never fully accepted it. They believed kindness should always be rewarded, that love should come with guarantees. These beliefs stayed with them, and life remained difficult for them. Not because of punishment, but because expectations can quietly steal peace. The elderly couple had lived differently. They expected nothing, and because of that, they were never disappointed. That realization came late to many, but it came years later, during a simple conversation. Someone said something that stayed with everyone listening. They said the elderly couple were not generous because they were strong. They were strong because they were generous. That thought changed how people looked at kindness. Kindness was no longer seen as something extra, something done when convenient. It became something necessary, like air or water, something that kept the heart alive. In another part of the town, an elderly man lived alone. He had heard the story many times. One day, a neighbor knocked on his door just to ask if he needed anything. The question surprised him. It also saved him from a loneliness he never spoke about. Moments like that never appeared in stories or records, but they mattered more than any inheritance. The elderly couple's life had created a quiet chain reaction. One act led to another. One choice influenced the next. Not perfectly, not everywhere, but enough. People slowly learned that forgetting kindness does not erase it. It only delays its return. Some who had felt shame learned to forgive themselves. They accepted that they had failed once and chose to do better later. That was enough. The couple had never demanded perfection. As time went on, the town no longer spoke about money or documents. They spoke about presence, about showing up, about calling before it was too late. And somewhere in all of this, the couple's story stopped belonging to them alone. It became a shared reminder, a reminder that love does not need witnesses, that kindness does not need applause, that truth will always find a way to be. Seeing the elderly couple never knew how far their quiet choices would travel. They never needed to know because the greatest stories are not written to be remembered. They are lived so others may learn.